I took $10 million of my family's money and created a national arts prize in my daughter's name. It looked like an act of charity, but it was a calculated act of war. It was my answer to the poison they stitched into her birthday dress. Hi everyone, and welcome back. My name is Laura. Before we begin, I want you to picture the coziest room in your home. For me, it's our small living room in Portland, where the late afternoon Oregon sun streams through the window, always smelling a little like pine and rain. That was the scene on my daughter Lily's 7th birthday. In the middle of the floor sat a package that was the complete opposite of our life, a sleek, silver box from a high-end boutique on Boston's Newbury Street. It was from my parents, Walter and Dorothy Beaumont. Lily's eyes, the color of a summer sky, were wide with an excitement that was so pure it almost hurt to watch. She tore into the paper, her little fingers clumsy with anticipation. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, was a gown of sapphire-blue velvet, the kind of dress a fairy-tale princess would wear to a royal ball. A squeal of pure, 7-year-old delight filled our apartment. She held it up against her small frame, twirling in a circle of pure joy. But then, she stopped. Her little body went rigid, the smile vanishing from her face. She stared down at the collar, her brow furrowed in confusion. In a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Mommy, what is this?" I knelt beside her, my heart starting to pound. My eyes followed her tiny, pointing finger. And then I saw it. It wasn't a tag. Hidden in the delicate seam was elegant, silver embroidery. They were words. My blood ran cold. If you know that feeling, that sudden cold drop in your stomach when a beautiful moment is tainted, just take a second and hit that like button. It's a quiet way of saying you understand, and it tells me I'm not alone in this. My hands started to tremble, but it wasn't from sadness. It was rage. A cold, clarifying anger that burned away years of confusion. Because that dress, that beautiful, expensive, sapphire-blue dress, wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. It was a declaration of war, disguised in velvet and silk, sent across the country from Boston to my quiet little world in Portland. It was designed to poison my daughter's mind against me, and it was the last time they would ever make that mistake. This isn't just a story about a ruined birthday. This is the story of how I took on the Beaumont family dynasty and dismantled their empire of control, piece by piece. My parents, Walter and Dorothy Beaumont, don't just live in Boston. They own a piece of it, socially and financially. They believe that everything and everyone has a price. They believe love is a transaction and loyalty is something you buy. For years, I believed that escaping them by moving 3,000 miles away meant I was free. But that day, I realized freedom isn't about distance. It's about power. And I was about to take mine back. This is one of those family revenge stories you hear about, but I lived it. My entire life, they had cast me in a role I never auditioned for. Let me know in the comments. Were you ever the family scapegoat? Type savior if you were always the fixer who had to clean up the messes, or star if you were the golden child who could do no wrong. I really want to see the balance in our community here. To understand the battle that was coming, you have to understand the kingdom I was supposed to inherit. My family's world is Beacon Hill in Boston, a place of gaslit cobblestone streets and historic brownstones that have been in the same families for generations. It's a world that runs on unspoken rules, Ivy League legacies, and public perception. My father, Walter Beaumont, is the founding partner of one of Boston's most powerful private equity firms, a man who thinks in billions and views emotion as a market liability. My mother, Dorothy, is the chairwoman of the Boston Symphony's board, a cultural gatekeeper who wields her influence with the precision of a surgeon. My life wasn't planned, it was engineered. From the day I was born, I was being groomed for my one and only purpose, to eventually take over the Beaumont Charitable Foundation, their crowning achievement, and a $200 million instrument of social power. It wasn't about giving back, it was about control, about ensuring the Beaumont name remained etched onto every significant institution in the city. But I had a different definition of a life well lived. The week after I graduated from Harvard, I turned down my seat on the board, packed 2 suitcases, and moved to Portland, Oregon. I used my savings to start a small nonprofit that provides studio space for struggling artists. In their world, it was the ultimate act of betrayal. I didn't just leave the family business, I publicly rejected their entire value system. To them, a life of purpose was worthless if it couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. My escape to Portland wasn't the end of their control, it was just the beginning of a new, colder war. For a few years, I thought I had built a life they couldn't touch. I fell in love with a man named Ethan, a musician who was kind, passionate, and measured a person's worth by their heart, not their portfolio. To my parents, he was the living embodiment of my failure. They didn't forbid me from marrying him, they were far more insidious. At every family gathering, they'd offer him helpful career advice, sliding him brochures for MBA programs. Their wedding gift was a trust, but one he could only access if he quit music and took a corporate job. They dripped slow-acting poison into the foundations of our marriage until the cracks started to show. The pressure eventually broke him, and our marriage along with it. The day my divorce was finalized, a FedEx envelope arrived. It wasn't a condolence card. It was a revised copy of the Beaumont family will. My name was still there, next to a staggering inheritance from the $300 million estate. But there was a new clause, meticulously drafted by their lawyers. I would only inherit my share if I dissolved my frivolous Oregon nonprofit, moved back to Boston, and permanently accepted my position on the foundation's board. It wasn't an inheritance, it was a ransom note. It's a terrible feeling when you realize the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are actually just holding your heart for ransom. If you've ever felt that, like your worth in the family was tied to how well you followed the rules, I want you to just write the current time where you are in the comments. It's a small way of marking the moment we choose to live in our own time, not on theirs. For 2 years after that revised will, the silence from Boston was deafening. No calls, no emails, not even the passive-aggressive Christmas card. It was a cold, calculated silence designed to make me feel the weight of my financial exile. I poured every ounce of my energy into my daughter, Lily, and my nonprofit, building a life that was rich in community and purpose, even if it was financially lean. Then, the week of Lily's 7th birthday, the silence broke. The arrival of that sleek, silver box from the most exclusive children's boutique in Boston felt like a sonic boom in our quiet life. I have to admit, my first instinct was pure suspicion. My parents never did anything without a strategic motive. But as I watched Lily's face light up, a foolish, treacherous part of me started to hope. Maybe they were tired of the fight. Maybe the birth of their only grandchild had finally softened their granite hearts. Maybe this extravagant gift was their way of waving a white flag, a gesture of unconditional love for a granddaughter they barely knew. The dress itself was a masterpiece, something that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. The velvet was so deep a blue it seemed to drink the light, and tiny, hand-stitched pearls shimmered along the collar. It was the kind of opulence I had run away from, but seeing the genuine wonder in my daughter's eyes, I felt a pang of something I hadn't expected. Guilt. Was I being selfish? Was my stubborn pride denying my daughter a life of comfort and opportunity that was rightfully hers? That's the most insidious part of their manipulation. It makes you question your own reality. Can I try it on, Mommy? Please? Of course, I said, pushing my doubts aside for the sake of her happiness. I helped her with the tiny, pearl buttons on the back. The dress fit her as if it were spun just for her, the sapphire velvet shimmering as she twirled in a patch of sunlight. For a fleeting second, I saw a glimpse of the life I denied her, a life of effortless beauty and privilege. And the guilt returned, sharp and unwelcome. But then her smile faltered. She stopped twirling and reached inside the collar of the dress, her brow crinkled. Mommy, there's something scratchy in here. I leaned in, expecting to find a forgotten tag or a loose thread. But it wasn't a tag, it was embroidery. Tiny, elegant, silver thread stitched directly into the silk lining of the collar. It wasn't a paper note that could be removed and discarded. It was part of the dress itself, permanent and venomous. The first message read, "Ask your mother why she chose this life over your legacy." My breath caught in my throat. My hands shaking, I quickly checked the hem, then the cuffs. They were everywhere. Each one, a tiny silver dagger. "Your real family is in Boston, waiting for you." And then, stitched into the inside of a pocket, the cruelest cut of all. The $50 million trust your great-grandfather left for you is waiting. Your mother is the only one keeping it from you. The hope I'd felt moments before didn't just die. It curdled into a resolve so hard and sharp I could feel it in my bones. This was no longer about my pride. This was about protecting my child from monsters who came disguised as grandparents. My first challenge was getting that toxic garment off my daughter without revealing the poison stitched within. With a smile I didn't feel, I told her, "It's so incredibly special, we have to save it for your party. We wouldn't want to risk a single drop of paint on it before then." She reluctantly agreed, and I carefully hung the dress in my closet, feeling like I was quarantining a biohazard. That night, after Lily was safely asleep, I didn't cry, I went to war. The mention of the $50 million trust my great-grandfather had established was their fatal mistake. It wasn't just a lie to manipulate a child, it was a specific, tangible thing I could fight for. I started tearing through my file cabinets and old boxes, searching for any document related to my grandfather's estate. Underneath a pile of college textbooks, I found a dusty shoebox labeled "From Grandpa Walter Sr." Inside, tucked beneath old photographs, was a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to me, written in his familiar, elegant script. It was a letter he had written me for my 21st birthday, but my parents had never given it to me. His words felt like a voice from beyond. He wrote of his concern that my father, his son, often mistook control for love. And then, the final paragraph, the one that changed everything. This $50 million trust is not another golden chain for him to bind you with. It is your key. It is your freedom. Use it to build a life of his design, not mine. Reading those words felt like my grandfather was reaching through time to put a sword in my hand. Have you ever discovered a piece of your family's history, a letter, a photo, a story that completely changed how you saw your own life? If you've ever felt the strength of your ancestors in a moment of crisis, I'd be so grateful if you would share where you're watching this from in the comments. Let's see how far these stories of inherited resilience reach. The letter didn't make me want to cry, it made me want to strategize. The grief for the childhood I never had could wait. Justice had to come first. By 3 a.m., my quiet Portland living room looked like a war room. The sapphire dress was laid out on my dining table under a bright lamp. I took high-resolution photographs of every single embroidered message with macro shots for clarity. I scanned my grandfather's letter at the highest possible resolution. I then spent 2 hours writing a detailed timeline, documenting every instance of financial and emotional manipulation I could recall since my college graduation, complete with dates and figures. The next morning, I wasn't on the phone with my best friend, Sandra, looking for sympathy. I was on a video call with Mr. Davies, one of Portland's most respected litigators. He was a calm, older man with eyes that had seen everything. He listened to my story without interruption, his expression hardening with every piece of evidence I presented on my screen. When I finished, he didn't offer condolences. He offered a strategy. "This is not a family dispute, Laura," he said, his voice firm. "This is a calculated campaign of harassment and financial coercion. We will treat it as such." Our plan was a three-pronged attack. First, a formal cease and desist letter, legally notifying my parents to stop all contact. Second, a demand for the immediate release of the $50 million trust, citing my grandfather's letter as undeniable proof of his intent. And third, the nuclear option. If they refused, a full dossier of the evidence would be delivered to the board of the Beaumont Foundation and leaked to the Boston Globe. I wasn't just coming for my money. I was coming for their legacy. Mr. Davies's office sent the legal notices via a process server the very next day. I got the confirmation email that the papers had been signed for at 10:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It felt like the opening shot in a war that had been brewing for 34 years. For 48 hours, there was only silence from Boston. I knew they weren't ignoring it. They were strategizing, confident they could crush this little rebellion. The response didn't come from my father. It came from the senior partner at a white shoe law firm in Boston, a man whose voice oozed condescending threats about frivolous lawsuits and family privacy. But we didn't engage. Davies simply informed him that the only conversation we were interested in was directly with Walter and Dorothy Beaumont. A four-way video conference was scheduled for the following afternoon. I sat in Mr. Davies's quiet, wood-paneled office, feeling strangely calm. On the large screen, my parents appeared, seated in their cavernous Beacon Hill study, a backdrop of leather-bound books and oil paintings. My father's face was a mask of thunderous rage. "This is an absurd, hysterical stunt, Laura," he began, his voice booming. I let him finish. Then I looked straight into the camera. "Walter," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. The shock on his face was immediate. "This is not a stunt. This is a legal proceeding based on documented emotional abuse and financial coercion. There's a moment when you stand up to a lifelong bully where the fear just evaporates. It's replaced by a clarity that is absolutely electrifying. Have you ever had that moment when you finally found the words to speak your truth to someone who has always held power over you? If you know that feeling of taking your power back, I want you to just type the word power in the comments below. Let's create a cascade of it." My father was momentarily speechless, a victory in itself. My mother, however, found her voice, sharp and brittle. "How dare you? After everything we have provided for you, you threaten us?" I let her indignation hang in the air for a moment before I delivered the final, fatal blow. "This was never about threatening you, Dorothy," I said, the name feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "It's about consequences. And you're right, you have provided for me. You've provided me with the perfect motivation." I leaned forward. "So let me be crystal clear about what happens next. You will release the full $50 million from my great-grandfather's trust into my control within 10 business days. That is non-negotiable. But I'm not going to just take the money and disappear." I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle. "I'm going to take $10 million of it and establish a new national foundation. It will be headquartered here, in Portland, and it will give out a yearly prize to emerging artists. It will be called the Lily Beaumont Prize for Fearless Creation. I'm going to use your money to build the single largest endowment for the arts on the entire West Coast. I am going to take the Beaumont name, your precious legacy, and I am going to redefine it. It will no longer be associated with cold Boston money and control. It will be a symbol of defiant, untamable creativity. Now, you can either have that happen quietly, or you can have it happen alongside a feature story in the Boston Globe with photos of this dress. The choice is yours." The color drained from my mother's face. In my father's eyes, the rage was finally eclipsed by something I had never seen before. Fear. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a dynasty cracking, of two lifelong puppeteers realizing their strings had just been cut. They didn't speak another word. After a long, tense moment, it was their own lawyer who cleared his throat, his voice stripped of all its earlier arrogance. "We will advise our clients to comply." And just like that, the war was over. There was no apology, of course. Narcissists don't apologize, they just retreat to plot a new angle. But for the first time, there was compliance. 9 days later, on a Tuesday morning, I got a notification from my bank. The wire transfer was complete. $50 million. It didn't feel like winning the lottery. It felt like reparations. But the money was only half the victory. The other half was ensuring my peace and, more importantly, Lily's. Through Mr. Davies, I sent them one final document. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a decree. First, all future communication would be handled exclusively through our legal counsels. No more calls, no more emails. Second, any unsolicited gifts sent to myself or my daughter would be immediately donated to charity, unopened. The era of the Trojan horse was over. And third, any attempt to contact Lily through her school or any other means would be treated as a violation of the cease and desist order, and we would pursue immediate legal action. It felt brutal, almost clinical, to lay down rules like that with my own parents. But protecting your child sometimes means protecting them from your own family. If you've ever had to build a wall not to keep love out, but to keep toxicity from getting in, I want you to know I see you. If this story resonates with that silent struggle, please consider subscribing and joining a community of people who understand that sometimes the strongest love is the one that says no more. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the menacing, calculated silence they used to punish me with. This was the empty, powerless silence of a king and queen who have been checkmated in their own throne room. For the first few months, I kept expecting some new form of attack, a loophole their lawyers might find. But nothing came. The ironclad boundaries we had erected held firm. Their power over me had been based on two things: financial control and my own deeply ingrained fear of their disapproval. Now that both were gone, they had nothing left. A few months later, a distant cousin who still travels in those Boston circles called me, ostensibly to wish Lily a happy holiday. In a hushed, gossipy tone, she mentioned that Walter and Dorothy had abruptly canceled their annual Founders Gala for the Foundation, a centerpiece of the Boston social season. The official reason given was a need for family privacy. For people whose entire existence was built on public performance, going dark like that was the ultimate admission of defeat. Their world, for the first time, was shrinking. Meanwhile, mine was finally beginning to expand. I hired a small, brilliant team, and we started laying the groundwork for the Lily Beaumont Prize. We leased office space in a beautiful converted warehouse in Portland's Pearl District. My days were filled with meetings with artists, philanthropists, and academics, people buzzing with ideas and passion. I was building something real, something born not from obligation, but from a genuine desire to create. I was finally using the resources of my birthright to reflect the values of my soul. But the most profound changes weren't happening in an office building. They were happening inside the walls of our small Portland home, and inside my own heart. The biggest difference was in Lily. Without the shadow of my parents' judgment hanging over us, a new lightness bloomed in our lives. I watched my daughter become more adventurous, less hesitant to speak her mind. She would debate her bedtime with the confident reasoning of a tiny lawyer, a fire in her I know would have been extinguished in the cold drawing rooms of Beacon Hill. She was growing up in a home where love wasn't a reward for compliance, but the very air she breathed. And as she blossomed, so did I. The low-grade anxiety that had been the constant soundtrack to my life for 3 decades began to fade. I started sleeping through the night. I rediscovered the simple joy of reading a book without feeling I should be doing something more productive. I realized that my sensitivity, as my mother called it, was actually empathy. My stubbornness, according to my father, was integrity. The confrontation hadn't just been an act of revenge, it was an act of radical self-love. It was the moment I finally decided that my own peace was more important than their approval, and that was a legacy worth more than any amount of money. Breaking free is the explosion, but the healing, that's the quiet sunrise that follows. It's the long, slow journey of rediscovering who you are when you're not constantly bracing for impact. If you have ever been on that journey of putting yourself back together after a toxic family dynamic, I would be so honored if you would share just one word in the comments that describes the feeling of finding yourself again. Peaceful, free, strong. Let's fill this space with the vocabulary of our rebirth. But I need to be clear about something. This journey of healing, this rebirth, it didn't happen in a vacuum. No one walks out of a lifelong war unscratched or alone. My strength was reinforced and validated by the people I chose to have in my life. My best friend, Sandra, was my anchor through it all. She had been the one who had seen me cry after my mother's backhanded compliments at my college graduation, the one who had listened for hours on the phone after my father called my husband a charity case. I remember calling her in a panic one night, months after the confrontation, because a certified letter had arrived from Boston. My hands were shaking, convinced it was a new attack. She didn't just calm me down, she drove the 20 minutes to my house at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, sat with me while I opened it. It turned out to be a residual tax document, and then stayed for tea until my heart stopped racing. She was my living memory, the person who could remind me that my actions weren't an overreaction, they were a necessary revolution. And then there was Mr. Davies. He started as my lawyer, but he became a quiet mentor. He taught me that the law wasn't just a sword to wield in battle, but a set of tools to build a fortress with. He guided me through the intricate process of structuring the Lily Beaumont Prize, ensuring it was legally untouchable, a legacy protected for generations to come. These people, the friend who shows up without asking and the professional who offers wise counsel, they become your chosen family. They legitimize your fight and stand guard over your newfound peace. It's been 3 years now since that confrontation. 3 years since the silence from Boston became permanent. The Lily Beaumont Prize for Fearless Creation is now one of the most respected arts awards in the Pacific Northwest, and my nonprofit has helped dozens of artists find their footing. Looking back, I see this was never really a fight about money. The millions of dollars were just the language my parents understood, the battlefield they chose. The real war was over a single, priceless thing: my autonomy. It was a battle between their definition of legacy and my definition of a life. People hear stories like this and call them family revenge stories. And I suppose, in a way, it island, but the victory wasn't in their defeat. It wasn't in the legal papers or the wire transfer. The real revenge is the sound of quiet, easy laughter in my home. It's Lily, now 10, passionately explaining black holes to her friends, completely unafraid of being seen as too smart. It's me, using their name to fund the very creativity they tried to stifle. The most profound revenge isn't making your abuser suffer, it's building a life so full of your own joy and purpose that their chapter in your story becomes a footnote. As for the sapphire dress, I kept it. It hangs in a garment bag in the back of my closet, a strange, beautiful artifact. It's no longer a symbol of their poison, but a testament to my own strength. It's a reminder that I was strong enough to disarm them and write my own ending. So, that is my story. But in the end, it's not just about what happened to me, it's about the lessons we can all take from these hidden wars. We are taught from a young age that family is unconditional, that blood is thicker than water. But I have learned that real family is not defined by blood, but by respect. True family is about who waters your roots, not who claims ownership of your branches. And what about justice? For years, I waited for some cosmic sense of karma to arrive and balance the scales. But I've come to believe that justice isn't always a passive force. Sometimes, you have to become your own justice. The consequence, the karma my parents received, wasn't a lightning bolt from the sky. It was the natural, silent emptiness that follows when you treat love like a commodity. It was the legacy they earned. The final question is always about forgiveness. For me, forgiveness was never about absolving them or pretending the wounds weren't real. It was about letting go of the exhausting hope that they would ever change. It was about forgiving myself for taking so long to see the truth. The most profound form of forgiveness is building a life so peaceful and so authentically yours that you no longer have any space left for their chaos. The power was never in their money or their name. The real power was always in my willingness to finally say no, and in the beautiful, quiet life that began to grow the moment I did. Thank you for holding space for my story today. It's not easy to talk about these things, these family revenge stories that are whispered but rarely shouted. The world may never know the battles you've fought behind closed doors. But the people in this community, we do. We see you. If these stories speak to a hidden chapter in your own life, I want to invite you to subscribe. This is more than a channel, it's a testament that our truths matter and our peace is worth fighting for. Be well and be brave.